Hello. So, about 2 years ago, in 2022, I was experiencing anxiety, something that I have never experienced before. And it was ongoing. It was continuous for a year, or a little over a year. And I was working as a bartender at the time. And I had a couple jobs, actually. I was bartending and I was a physical trainer part-time. So I had to keep up with, social cues and being in an environment where I had to respond to everybody's needs as a bartender. And at that time, I could barely respond to my own needs. So my anxiety was getting worse, and I started to see a therapist. And when I was seeing the therapist, he would ask me questions, or he would state things like, so you have a job, you have friends, you have a home that you're living at, aside from living with your folks. You're moving forward in life, so what's the problem? And I didn't have to answer that. I didn't know what the problem was. I was missing something, but I couldn't figure out what it was, and neither could my therapist. He looked at me and he thought I was a pretty normal person who was coming to get therapy from the people that he was used to having. So anyways, I was continuing to just live with it and deal with it for over a year, and it ended up becoming severe. And so one day I was at my job, and most of the time I was able to keep the anxiety in and just allow myself to not make it known to other people. But that day when I was working, it was very difficult for me to keep it to myself, and it just became transparent. Everybody could probably recognize that I was living in fear. And so because of this, that day after work, I sat down. I was waiting for my coworkers to finish before I could leave. And I remember looking at my phone, and I typed in the suicide hotline. And I messaged my friend who I was living with at the time, and I told her basically what was going on, even though she already kind of had a general idea of how I was feeling for the past year. But so I told her what was going on, and I went home that night with my roommate, and I told her that I didn't want to live anymore. Now, I never went to the extent of taking action on that. I never wanted to kill myself or proceed with it, but I didn't want to live. I didn't know how to live, and it was just, my life was just burdensome. Every day was torturous. So that night I ended up going to, her and I went in the car, and we drove to Charlton, because at that point I chose to sink. I didn't want to swim anymore. I didn't know what to do, and I needed help, and I didn't have God at the time. So although I was involved with God my entire life, I never had a relationship with him. So I went to Charlton that night, and my friend came with me, and she had called my family. So my mother and my father came to Charlton, and they were sitting next to me while I was waiting to be checked in as a psych patient, because I wanted to end my life, so there's not really anything else that the hospital can do aside from put me in that field or that area. And so my parents came, and my friend left, and she just seemed traumatized from what she had witnessed with me and how I was, just the state that I was in. And so she left, and my parents came, and they were just sitting aside from me and sitting with me. And I just remember feeling completely hopeless. Like this was just the end. I had no hope. And so I ended up getting checked into the hospital, and I went in, and they put on a green tag, and I sat in the middle of the hospital room for 24 hours. I wasn't checked into a room or anything. I was just sitting there, and I was contemplating my entire life the whole time, while my mom was sitting aside from me, also probably traumatized. I'm sure she still is to this day. And so after that day, after I checked out of the hospital, I made sure that whatever it is that I was saying to the people, in order for me to leave the hospital, was valid and it made sense. That way I wouldn't be sent to a mental facility. And so I made sure what I was saying made sense, and then I left. I left there, and nothing was the same. Ever since that day, my life was never the same. And after that, living became almost impossible. I remember I had left my apartment that I was living at, and I went back with my family, and I was staying with them for a while. And I would see my friend who came with me to the hospital every now and then, and when I saw her, I would tell her every day, I was like, this is the end. Like, today I'm dying, because I didn't have the ability to move forward. I literally did not know how to live. And during this time, it was basically the devil. Just as soon as I decided to give up, the devil was able to come into my mind and completely manipulate me. And so it was just traumatizing. And so I was at home for a while. And I remember I was in my mom's bed, and I was laying down, and I said to myself, or to God, I said, why? Like, why do you care? And I remember the only time in my entire life that I have ever heard God's voice loud and clear was this time, and he said, because I love you. And I said, okay, well, then I guess I must push on. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what that was, what was to come. But every night for months, every time I would go to sleep, I would be completely manipulated by the devil, and I almost died multiple different times. And I know it's very vague to just say I almost died, but it's really hard for me to explain how and what happened every night, because I don't even really understand it. But I just know my body was paralyzed, and I couldn't move, and my brain was just pulsating constantly for months. And I remember I remember thinking every week, and it was weird because it would fall on the Sabbath every week too, and I would think, like, I need to see a doctor, but I also knew that if I saw a doctor, my brain would light up, and I knew that they would try and medicate me with bipolar medicine or whatever, something. And I knew that there was something more than medicine, because I had dealt with anxiety prior to that, and I never wanted to resort to medicine when I was seeing my therapist. I knew that there was something more, and that could heal me. And so I continued to let God do what he needed to do in my life. I figured out how to pray. I isolated myself from everyone, and I just prayed fervently day after day, constantly. That's all I was doing. And I just learned and tried to understand and grasp who God is and what his power is capable of. It was about building a relationship and building trust with the Lord, because that's how every relationship works. It's hard for me to just be like, okay, well, I'm praying to you now. where's the outcome? I wanted it so quickly, but at the same time, I needed to be patient because I knew that he was building trust with me. And so during the time for the past year and a half where I have been very ungentle to myself, the Lord was gentle to me. Thank you.